Hi guys, so I'm editing images today and I came across an edit that I use all the time for high contrast images. I don't think we've talked about it here before, so I figure I'll take you through the whole process and show you what I do. It might be a little helpful, so stick around. So editing high contrast images can be challenging. You have really bright highlights and really dark shadows. Getting those to mix together properly and getting everything to work can be a little tough sometimes. So I figure I'll take you through a shot that I took last year, go through the whole editing process, and in the end I'll show you a couple little things that I do to shots like this to make them look a little bit better. So let's jump into the computer. So let's go right into Lightroom. I have my image loaded here. Some of you may recognize the location. Disney's Magic Kingdom. This was shot January 19th, 2018, late afternoon, 4:46 p.m., hence the late afternoon shadows that we're going to be talking about. This was shot from up on the train station platform, obviously looking up Main Street. It was shot with a 135mm f2.0 lens, wide open at 2.0. I was going for a shallow depth of field where I can kind of focus on the foreground here, the beginning of Main Street, with the signs, with the balloons, and some of these people down here being in focus, and everything behind it, including the castle, having a nice soft bokeh out of focus effect there. So that's what I was going for, and this is the raw image as it looks right out of the camera. So you can see it's kind of flat, not very colorful, but that's really what you get with the raw images. But there's a lot of information in here, so we can start digging in. The first thing I want to do, especially when I'm shooting wide open, is just see whether or not I want to correct for the lens issues with vignette and things like that. When you're shooting wide open, you'll get some darkness around the edges, you'll see here. And if I click on Enable Profile Corrections, it'll correct that a little bit. Sometimes you want that effect, you want those dark edges, and sometimes you don't. So by clicking on this, I can see it brightens up my corners a little bit. Doesn't do much else to the image other than that, so I'm going to leave that clicked on and roll forward from there. So then I want to make sure I have my white balance in balance. I'll click on the dropper. I'll find a nice neutral source, something with all 50s across the reds, greens, and blues, which is right about there on the castle. Click on that. It didn't really change very much at all, but I just want to always make sure that that's correct. And then I can start digging in and working on my brightness, my highlights, my shadows, and then my colors. So you can see right away you've got these bright highlights over here on the top right and these dark shadows over here on the bottom left. Now there still is a lot of information in there. So what I want to do is bring my highlights down while I'm bringing my shadows up. So just for the time being, I'm going to crank the highlights all the way down. You can see that actually increases the contrast and color a little bit on this bright portion over here. And I want to bring my shadows up, see how far I want to push it before it starts looking funny. And I mean, I can really crank it all the way up to plus 100. It still looks okay over here. So let me work with that for now. Anytime you're decreasing your highlights, increasing your shadows, and smoothing out the brightness in a scene overall, it's going to reduce your contrast. So I want to bring my contrast up. I usually don't go much further than about 10 or 15 or so. So let me bring that up just a little bit. That's fine. My overall exposure, I want to bring up just a little bit. That's fine there. And you can see how it's kind of already coming together. I want to increase my whites. What I do with my whites and blacks, just kind of push them as far as I can in either direction. So if I hold down the Alt button and drag my whites over, I can keep going until everything gets blown out. See, that's a little too far. Now my whites are blown out, so I'll bring it back a little bit. I'm good right about there. I'm going to do the same thing with my blacks. I'm going to hold down Alt, drag my blacks to the left, until they start to show up right about there. So now I've brought back my contrast, my colors are looking better, and I have some nice detail in the shadows over here, and I've retained my highlights. Scrolling down my toolbar here, I don't like to mess with clarity too much, especially when I'm using shallow depth of field. Clarity is great for kind of tightening up the brightness and contrast a little bit in a particular spot. But when I have a scene like this where I have a lot out of focus, I kind of like to leave my bokeh alone and not mess it up too much with clarity. So I'll forego the clarity for now. Bring my vibrance up a little bit because it's a nice colorful scene. Then I can play around a little bit with some of my individual colors. I like the reds in the signs on Main Street, so I'll bump that up just a little bit. Same with the oranges. Yellow being my least favorite color, I normally drag that down a little bit, but then I'm going to lose some of the detail in the gold on the castle. So I'll kind of just leave that about where it is. Not much green in the scene, I can leave that alone. My blue in the sky, I want to just bring that up just a little bit, make my sky a little bit bluer. Purple is not much going on, I can drag that up or down, doesn't really make a difference. Same thing with magenta. So my colors are all really not adjusted very much at all. This is a nice colorful scene to begin with. Then I just want to make sure I have my cropping correct. I want to make sure I'm nice and straight, which looks like I can tilt a little bit to the left. That looks good. I'm nice and straight. Now I can start adjusting just particular spots. So using the adjustment brush, I can zero in on just particular areas that I want to adjust. So I mentioned clarity before. I'm going to adjust the clarity up in some of these sharp in focus spots here, but not too much. I'll put about a +20 on there, and then I can just paint over this area, including some of these signs and the balloons for sure down on the street here. You can always hit O to see where exactly your adjustment is, and if you want to take some away, hold down the Alt key and that turns into a minus, and then you can just erase some of what you've done. Easy enough. So let me continue with some adjustments. I've played around with my highlights and shadows, so I want to re-emphasize some of the brighter parts. I'll add about 1/3 of a stop of brightness to a few particular spots that I've brought down by dragging down the highlights. So maybe these balloons down here will get a little brighter, and maybe just a little bit on these turrets of the castle that the sun is hitting. Just emphasize those just a little bit. So you can see here if I hit O, exactly where I adjusted. Not much, but just a little bit to bring a little bit of the brightness and pop back to a few spots. And then the last thing I'm noticing about this image is the one other adjustment that I mentioned before that I always look into when editing a scene like this is, when you have bright highlights over here, you have dark shadows over here, you have different temperatures of light hitting different parts of your scene. So you have some nice warm light hitting up here, and you have these cool shadows down here. And it just doesn't look right to me. You can see the nice oranges and yellows and reds up here, and everything kind of looks shadowy and cold down here on the bottom left. So going back to my adjustment brush again, I'm going to add a little bit of temperature. Try plus about 35 or so down to the street here, and you can see right away how everything kind of pops. The colors come out a little bit nicer. It's a little bit more warm and inviting down on Main Street, as it should be, and it really balances out the scene as far as the color temperature goes with everything else. So that's done. That was a pretty quick edit. I'm going to hit my backslash, and you can see the before and after. Not too bad. That's a quick edit. So don't be scared away if you have a bright, sunny, cloudless day, a lot of deep shadows, a lot of bright highlights. There's so much that you can do after the fact in Lightroom to get the most out of your images. So that's how I'll edit an image like that. Hopefully, you know, something helped you in there maybe. If you have any tips for me, anything that you do with high contrast images like these, definitely put it in the comments below. I'd love to hear it. I'm planning on doing a whole series of videos like this where I basically go from the planning stages right through to final editing, everything in between, of all different types of images that we take. So look forward to that coming up in the near future. Definitely subscribe to the channel and click on that little notification bell. This way you get notified every time we post a video. And thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.